to Dr. O'Sullivan, who will give us some guidance on the international aspects.
Good morning. I have a quite formal title here, the role of center-based engineering R&D in future national innovation systems. I think a more slightly accurate title perhaps would be, these are some personal reflections on having read a lot of international center call documents and innovation policy. So I'm going to try and reflect where there are some new things, where there are some patterns, maybe not entirely new, but where there's new emphasis, new urgency. So I'm going to give a quick overview of some global trends which are perceived internationally to be shaping future innovation systems. I'm going to talk about some of the innovation policy responses to those and the way they're shaping the design, the early thinking on new engineering research centers, new models, early experiments. This kind of list of global megatrends, this is where I'm going to focus my efforts, not so much on the convergence of new research coming up, but on these top high-level trends shaping systems. So you'll see lists of these kind of things, big socioeconomic challenges, demographic change, changing customer habits, customization, sustainability, and so on. These are shaping innovation policies, national innovation strategies. In most countries, you'll see them at the beginning of recent national innovation strategies in Germany and Japan and so on. The precise list will change depending on the industrial context, industrial strengths, particular problems, but there are, I think, some consensus on how policy might respond. So I think there is, again, I'm highlighting emphasis of urgency, a lot more attention to challenge-led innovation. You'll see that in a lot of documents feeding its way down into center calls. A lot more, as a consequence, emphasis on user engagement and finding new ways to engage with a broader range of users who have something to say about these broader societal problems. Speed of translation has always been there, but I think there's a greater urgency, a greater sense of competition. And connected to that is not just creating new prototypes and test beds, but addressing issues of manufacturability and making sure things are manufacturing ready, demonstrators that are ready to be scaled up. There's issues of being globally connected. People want, of course, these centers to be globally connected, but there's also a sense that there's a sort of tension between national value capture. And that's an interesting thing to reflect on to make sure there's an appropriate net flow of knowledge and innovation to the home economy. An important and interesting, I think, change of emphasis is the role of centers in a broader system context, how they connect to other innovation actors, to national labs, to some new applied R&D institutes, to other things like national metrology labs. A sense of how linkages between centers and these other organizations can accelerate innovation, can help translation, can help them be more fit for purpose for making an impact on the challenges or manufacturability. How there are other complementary capabilities that can be put together to tackle some of these bigger challenges. And something that's featuring, I think surprisingly for me anyway, prominently in some of these documents is a sense of how all of these things join together and the role of the centers in joining them together to create a sort of value proposition for attracting investment or retaining inward investment. So just say a little bit more about globalization and the role of centers in attracting R&D. One of the things that is striking reading a lot of recent call documents related to engineering research centers is this specific reference to their potential role in attracting inward investment. There's a figure there from PricewaterhouseCoopers talking about the mobile nature of global R&D investment. There's almost as much R&D from US headquartered companies being spent outside the US than inside the US. There's more US R&D, corporate R&D being spent in Europe than is coming in the other direction. More and more is going to Asia. Asia recently became the #1 destination for investment in corporate R&D. As I said, it's striking the references, the sense of urgency, the sense that there's a competition appearing in policy documents related to innovation systems, things appearing explicitly in call documents about centers or in the missions of centers. Always been the case in countries, I guess, like Ireland or Singapore, which rely on R&D, but also appearing in call documents for big R&D institutes in the UK or even in Germany. And not just their own role in doing that, but as a sort of honest brokers in helping develop supply chains, broker interactions with larger firms, trying to understand a specific role of centers in trying to understand what the future environment where those corporations want to invest and trying to understand what their role is in nurturing that environment. It's possibly obvious, but I'll say it anyway. It's interesting to look at some of these international center call documents rationalizing the value of critical mass centers, not just to have a critical mass you can take on problems of a scale and a scope that an individual PI couldn't do by themselves, but the value of critical mass in the context of this global competition for investment in just being visible. It's important to have critical mass investments so that you can be seen, not just for corporations potentially investing in these other countries, but being visible to SMEs that you might want to engage with as well, who don't necessarily always find their way to the university research that can help them. There's an interesting conversation in some of these international documents about national value capture, an emphasis on centers being connected globally to other centers. An interesting debate, I think, which is worth reflecting on in areas like advanced manufacturing, about the net flow of knowledge between different countries, sort of phenomenon people will point to in terms of a division of labor between more mature innovation economies partnering with less mature innovation economies, and a division of labor where more engineering science is happening in the Western countries, more manufacturing prototyping scale-up is happening in catch-up economies, and a concern that maybe there's a net flow of knowledge into building a know-how, an ability to scale up and capture value through manufacturing in other countries, and a retreat back into engineering science and losing contact with the factory floor and the manufacturing base in other countries. And how do you balance that? I won't dwell on this, but this focus on challenge-led innovation, whether they be larger challenges like aging and health and urbanization that we heard about earlier, or emerging cross-cutting technologies that can matter to all of these, this focus on challenges, on user-defined, user-led challenges and calls for proposals is very striking. The extent to which specific quantitative stretch goals are specified doesn't typically happen top-down, but an encouragement for applicants to work with their users to define more quantitative stretch goals that can be a focus for research agendas is increasingly common. Part of that is there are more thematic calls as opposed to just general open research center calls. And whether that's a good thing or not is an interesting question. One of the consequences, I think, of having more thematic calls on something like sustainability or advanced manufacturing or whatever, is that the community tends to focus around that. You tend to have national workshops or national road mapping strategies which tend to bring the community together. They tend to identify networks among individual potential collaborators. They tend to highlight key barriers to impact, prioritize innovation challenges. The consequence is that some of the sort of pre-proposal due diligence that you want to see in advance of a center competition happens in this way. The proposals that come in are perhaps better configured. Just say a few more things about accelerating innovation, which is an important emphasis. I guess it's always been there. One of the things that seems to be newish, is an increasing emphasis on manufacturability, on scale up, on making sure it's not just that you're doing demonstrators and test beds, but you want to ensure that the demonstrators you create are more manufacturing ready, that there's a transferability to pilot lines, there's a transferability to scale up. So very large investments, a lot of attention in the European Commission and some other countries on pilot lines, on facilities that are center-like but have more manufacturing scale-up, more manufacturing-ready type of environments, which I think is interesting. There's a lot of emphasis on, or you see more emphasis on being agile and responsive to market opportunity, on finding ways to get more information about market opportunities and routes to market. You see experiments, I think like the UK's innovation and knowledge centres, which try and more proactively create what they call an entrepreneurial environment, but what it ends up being is more engagement perhaps, as we heard earlier, with folk from business schools and economics departments or technology management and operations management to do more expert analysis of markets, to identify more routes to market, and perhaps involving, again, things like road mapping exercises so you can understand the barriers and enablers to achieving those markets, to understand maybe what some of the key challenges are, what some of the key research priorities are to pursue them. So there seems more engagement with management and business as part of a more technical agenda in many countries. again, a more practical issue, but there's different ways of being responsive and being agile. Possibly just worth noting that in the some of the German collaborative research center programs, they have sort of supplementary transfer projects, so that if you find an opportunity that you want to pursue, or a new demonstrator you hadn't been anticipated, or a new opportunity for a test bed, or a new opportunity of that type occurs to you, you can quickly apply for a transfer project with your industrial partner, with another research institute to pursue it, so that you don't have to be locked into your original agenda. So there's a sort of responsiveness, agility emphasis, and trying to find new ways of being able to respond to opportunities as they appear is an important focus of a lot of new calls. Finally, I guess there's, again, very striking to me anyway, because I don't think you'd have seen this certainly in the UK or bits of Europe 5 years ago, is a lot more emphasis on engaging with other partners, especially new innovation institutes. So in the UK, we have what's called the Catapult program, often compared to the Fraunhofers. I think they're a little bit analogous to the recent National Manufacturing Innovation Institutes you have here in the United States. So focusing on technology readiness level 4 to 6, more contract R&D, more sort of job shop access to facilities and so on. You'll see in new ERC-like calls an emphasis on challenging the applicants to say how they might be engaging with these kind of entities. How are they leveraging facilities? How are they leveraging their networks? How are they leveraging their insights that have been learned from contract research? Are the things that you can do better together, especially around some of these larger industrial socioeconomic challenges? You see experiments in other places with universities and these kind of institutes, but the centers are closely involved. New sort of joint labs, joint appointments, movement of researchers, shared facilities. There's new actors, and I guess so one of the key points is in focusing on new models for centers is not just that the research is changing and there's convergence in research fields, but the other actors that are in the system and the things that can be leveraged and the knowledge they have is also changing, and to pay attention to that. And again, in the UK, you'll see more emphasis in, again, challenging applicants to, are they engaging with other institutes like the National Metrology Lab or other types of national lab? Even in Germany, which is a sort of very well-evolved sort of Fraunhofer model of research institutes and a range of other research institutes, they're still experimenting with new ways of bringing them together so they can do new things. So there's a new Forschung campus initiative, center-like endeavors on university campuses, specifically about bringing university center research together with research institutes and industry partners or other stakeholders to do things that couldn't be done in their individual organizations, which I think is very interesting. Again, as I said at the beginning, some of this again connected to creating an environment, creating networks which is attractive to investment or which can retain national investment. So some high-level points there. I'll just finish up by concluding that there are national innovation policies which are shaping new center programs, significant attention. They're always framed in terms of these global megatrends to the future competitiveness of national innovation systems and the future well-being of citizens, and a sense that at a high level, future competitive innovation systems and the future engineering research centers that are inside them are likely to be more, at least some of them, more challenge-focused and certainly more user-engaged, and we'll have to find new ways of doing that effectively. Huge emphasis on agility and adaptability. There's a real sense of urgency and competition in these documents, not least around speeding up translation and scaling up and really industrializing things and capturing value, perhaps even in manufacturing in the home economy. And increasing attention to these organizations and the centers being networked and aligned with themselves, with other national innovation organizations, with regional. Sometimes there's regional ones, a very strong, sophisticated way of doing that in Germany, and other international innovation actors, so they can collectively make a difference, they collectively capture value for the economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. O'Sullivan, for describing some of the themes and trends in the global context.